David lived? The real answer for us will be a long time ago. So to make it simple and round and not accurate, 3,000 years ago. The truth is he wasn't the first one here. Therefore, the name City of David can't be the original name. That's because I can't name a city after a person that wasn't even born yet. The city was here before. How much time before? At least 800 years before. So 3,800 years ago, otherwise known as 3,800 years back, a city was built right here. When I say the word city, what do I mean? How do we define cities today? There's one thing we care about today.
Buildings.
The answer to the question?
Buildings.
Buildings, not only buildings, but also people. How many people live in the buildings, which means the answer to the question. In the ancient world, you can't miss the difference. A city and a town do not look alike. By the way, size and population, they didn't care. A city, by definition, is a place that can protect itself, which means it has walls and soldiers and some king or government that controls it. So what happens here, approximately 3,800 years ago, or a little bit before, is that a tribe arrives here with their soldiers, their workers, and chieftains. They take the existing town and build walls around it, make it into a city. So as they put the first few stones down on the ground, the Egyptians hear about this. They live hundreds of miles from here. And the Egyptians really, really are bothered. Why? Because in those days, the Egyptians believed this land was their private property. They hear someone stealing their property, building a city on it with no permission. So what do? They decide to destroy the city as fast as possible. What is the fastest way to destroy a city? Destroy the walls. Can they destroy the walls long distance? No. What did they need to do? Take their army, organize it in Egypt, leave Egypt, cross the Sinai Desert, start walking up the mountains, set a siege around the city, break down, destroy the walls, and then walk all the way back home. Is this fast? Not at all. So what do the Egyptians do? They decide to send someone else to do the job for them. They sent their gods to destroy the city for them. How do you do that? I know people that do this every day, basically.
Pray.
You can pray. Another option, very common in the ancient world, offering a sacrifice. But what the Egyptians did is much, much nicer. They sat down and wrote a curse. They wrote a curse against the governors and the city of Rushalimum, Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. First time the city is ever mentioned in any source we have is an Egyptian curse from a little bit more than 3,800 years ago. Did the curse work? I have to admit, I don't care. But it's the most ancient reference we have to the existence of the city. Apparently these curses, their whole idea wasn't really to destroy the city, but actually to frighten the locals. Which means you actually have to tell the people of Jerusalem they're being cursed. So apparently a messenger left Egypt with the text of the curse, arrived right here, handed it to the governor, and then there are usually two options: kill the messenger or believe the curse. Again, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but that's the most ancient reference we have to the existence of the city, thousands of years ago. From approximately the same time, they found fortifications and even residential homes in this hill that we will visit in the coming few hours. 800 approximately years later, King David enters the same city, and what does he do? He changes its name. It was named as Jerusalem, and he calls it City of David after himself. Unfortunately for him, no one took him seriously, and everyone kept on calling this place Jerusalem during his days and also in the next centuries later on. Which means the name City of David was actually barely ever used in the ancient times. So why do we call it City of David today? Very simple. If the name of the site would be Jerusalem, you'd all be right now where? Up there. You know those walls? Everyone calls them the old city walls. So first of all, it's time to tell you these aren't old. And that isn't the city. But that's what everyone thought throughout the Middle Ages and the modern time. Everyone believed David, Solomon, and the biblical Jerusalem is actually up there. So when archaeologists said we found something in Jerusalem, everyone thought it was up there. So about 100 or a little bit more years ago, archaeologists said, you know what? Let's rename this area where Jerusalem was really born, City of David, to make it different from all the rest. And that made people locate where Jerusalem was born. So we call it City of David, even though it was here actually before David was around. So that's the first thing. That takes us to much more than 3,000 years back. And in this tour, we'll try to go as far as possible into those ancient times. But there are two things we have to know. One, the size, or the average size of a city. Today, more than 90% of modern population live in cities. In the ancient world, it wasn't like that. Today, most population live in cities, and barely anyone in the modern world are farmers. In the ancient world, almost everyone were farmers, and barely anyone lived in the city. So when we'll see the size of the city, you might be amazed how tiny it is. Cities were much, much smaller than they are today. That's one thing. But the second thing is that when we go far back in time, we need to actually erase all the new things. So we will be interested in nothing new in this tour, and new for me is 2,000 years ago. We will go almost 4,000 years back in time, and to the first temple period, we won't be dealing with modern things that happened 2,000 years ago and later. I know there are countries where new is yesterday. Here it's far back. Top of what was here before and not up in midair. Take a look from the mosque to the left, to the right. You'll see the stones, you'll see the size growing of the stones all the way to the corner. We'll call that corner the southeastern corner. Now back to the mosque and look to the left. You'll see a tower, 2 trees, and another corner. That's the southwestern corner. Southwestern, southeastern corners of what? Sorry? A very famous building. The building is known as the Temple Mount, and the Temple Mount looks like this. Any questions? Guys, you're allowed to ask. It's okay. The Temple Mount is a platform. On its southern edge, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is built. Closer to the center is the Dome of the Rock, or Golden Dome. These are 2 Muslim monuments from 1,300 years ago. The platform was here before. We are facing the platform's southern wall between the southeastern and southwestern corners. Have you ever heard of the western wall? Have you ever heard of the southern wall? Eastern wall. Northern wall. So I'll tell you this, there are 4 walls. These 4 walls are very good friends, and no one ever heard of 3 of them. These 4 walls were built about 2,000 years ago, around a hill called Mount Moriah, that we can't see anymore. This happened during the time of the Second Temple period, and the Second Temple was built on top of the hill. A platform was built around it, and to support it, 4 huge walls, northern, western, southern, and eastern, that together form a big box that actually conceals the hill from our eyes. So King David, 3,000 years ago, didn't see all this. It wasn't here yet. He looked up north and saw an open hill called Mount Moriah. At the time, there was nothing built on top. A little bit closer to us, you can see the old city walls. The truth is, they're not old. They're the newest we have. They're from 475 years ago. They were built by the Turks in the 16th century, but they managed to fool all the visitors. Everyone believed that these new walls are exactly on top of the more ancient walls. Today, we know that isn't true. A little bit further up, with the new city walls. That's how we call them. We climb up. Up a mountain west of us called Mount Zion. In between us and Mount Zion, there's a valley. It's a little bit hard to see because it got filled up with dirt, rocks, garbage, ruins, and modern buildings. There's no water running through it. But to locate it, all you need to do is look at that gray bus. See the gray bus? Mm-hmm. Notice that a little bit to the left, you see a bridge? Yep. That's where the Central Valley passes. Right there. To the other direction, you can see the Mount of Olives Ridge. And what separates us from it is a deep valley down below. Kidron Valley is its name. And we now put all this on a map. And then we will able not to get lost as we continue on. So this is our map. And let's see what we have. We have the Kidron Valley, colored in blue. Please do not be fooled. There's no water in it also when it's raining. Same thing with the Central Valley. We are in between. This line is the new city walls. Please ignore them. They do not exist in this tour. The city of Jerusalem, 3,800 years ago, is just the area colored in red. So crossing the city from side to side, from east to west, is something like a 4-minute walk. I know this isn't impressive, but this is the normal size of the city. Yes?
No, I was going to say, so the walls of that city don't exist at all?
Oh, no. We'll see
Okay.
a little bit of them.
Okay.
Let's get back to David 3,000 years ago and look around. Does he see the Al-Aqsa Mosque?
No.
Does he see these walls?
Of course not.
Does he see the neighborhood behind you?
No.
So what does King David see around him?
A mountain
You're
and,
right.
and a city.
Wait a moment. He
Fortress,
sees
right?
a mountain to the north, Mount Moriah, mountain to the east, Mount of Olives, mountain to the west, Mount Zion. He's so impressed, he decides to write a song about them. He takes his quill, dips it in ink, spreads a piece of parchment on the table, and writes what we call in Hebrew Tehillim, Psalms. There he says, Yerushalayim harim savivla, which means the city of Jerusalem is surrounded by hills. Look around, that's what you see. Of course, there weren't all these buildings on those hills. Are we in a protected location? What do you say?
It's because of the valley.
Looks not bad, right?
Yeah.
But what happens if the enemy puts a cannon up there? Lucky for them, thousands of years ago, cannons weren't invented yet. Neither were catapults nor ballistas, so the enemy approaching with the sword will have to cross the central valley. There's no water there, but it's a way down and then a way up. Cross the Kidron Valley and climb up. So from 3 directions, the city is naturally protected. Just from the north, from Mount Moriah, Temple Mount area today is the easy downhill run, smashing in, and the northern edge has to be fortified. Almost all the enemies attacking Jerusalem throughout its history came from the north. So please erase all the buildings you see, all those walls and all those structures. Put a few trees instead and open fields. No one lives up around. Where is the city? It's right down here. See these few houses and trees? This is the hill that we call today City of David. You can see how the slopes go steeply down to the left, down to the Kidron Valley, where the cars are parked. A little bit further down, can you see a grassy area with a path crossing? To the right, ruins. Part of the ruins there are for the fortification walls of Jerusalem from the first temple period and before. Now look to your right. See the bridge? That's it. You already crossed the city in your eyesight. So our whole tour will take us down this hill into the ancient city. And in the 19th century, everyone expected to find David and Solomon up there. Slowly, they identified that the real ancient city is down here. In the beginning of the 20th century, they agreed that it's here. But then came World War I, 1923, archaeologists arrive at the northern edge of the hill of the city of David. Say if it's here, the northern edge has to be fortified. And they start an excavation trying to find the northern fortification. Has anyone here ever participated in archaeological excavation? Well, let's just imagine this is the space. They don't work with machines. They work by hand. Why? Because the machines might accidentally destroy things without noticing. So they take all the dirt, bucket load by hand, and remove it. What do they find under the dirt? More dirt, you're right. So they remove that and find? More dirt. And here and there, rocks. Part of these rocks are rubble rolling around. Part of these rocks are ruins of buildings. So let's just imagine that this is the building discovered. What do they do with it? They take pictures, draw a plan, and then, believe it or not, they take each and every stone and throw it away. Why? Because there's another building underneath. So they take pictures, draw a plan, and then throw it away and find another one. And they take pictures, draw a plan, and then throw it away and find another one. And another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. 20 layers of ruins is perfectly normal. The deeper down you go, the more ancient you find. So that's what archaeologists actually do. They get rid of all sorts of stuff to find what's hidden deep down and then get rid of that. So in 1923, when the excavation begins from surface, they actually go down through layers of ruins, throwing out a lot of dirt and rocks. Eventually, they write a report and say, "We're sorry, we found no big fortress." All sorts of different ruins, mostly residential homes, nothing really big and impressive. So why leave it open? They take all the dirt and rocks that were thrown out and eventually throw it all back in. And what we get is a huge mess. And then everyone says, okay, listen, we're on a hill. And when you're on a hilltop with steep slope down to the central and Kidron valleys, don't really expect everything to just sit there and wait for you. Almost everything from the top will be rolling down. So where should we find the ancient ruins? Rolling down. 1960s excavation starts going down the slope. Come please. Right up here. Get to the edge and take a look down, please. Past me, there's enough room. You can take a look right down below. And what you'll be able to see right down below us and a little bit to the right, see something that looks like a staircase. See that thing? That is not a staircase. That big thing right there is actually a huge man-made support that held up whatever was up here. Something very big at the top of the hill. A little bit further down, can you see all those small walls? Those small walls are ruins of residential homes. They're from the first temple period. They were found smashed, crushed, burnt, and destroyed. Which means that lots of kitchen utensils and pieces of furniture and everything remains inside, teaching us a lot of the normal lifestyle people living here. All this was found totally covered by big broken blocks of stone that fell from the top of the hill, smashing and covering everything. Part of these blocks of stone were really big. 2 of them even had a decoration on them. Let's go back right up here. I just don't want to block away. Come please. 2 of those stones, as I mentioned, with a decoration. One was about this size, the other slightly smaller. They put them one next to each other and found out they're two pieces of the same original stone. The original glued together today is in the Israel Museum. A copy is hanging off the wall. That triangle with two ears is what we call a capital. What is a capital? The top of a column. The column and capital, what happened to them? They broke into pieces, rolled down the slope. This style, this decoration is common throughout Israel and surrounding countries, in palaces and gatehouses and important buildings during the first temple period. Many years pass. End of the 1990s. Dr. Eilat Mazar, an Israeli archaeologist from Lingard University, says, okay, all this rolled down from the top, which means at the top there was a big building, at least from the first temple period, right? So let's dig the top again. Because maybe in the 1920s excavation, maybe they didn't go down deep enough. Maybe there's more to go. Everyone told us it's going to be a huge waste of time and money. She said, okay, fine, I'll live with that. Hopefully it won't be a big, huge waste of time, and it's okay. So she arrives and starts signing and getting the permit signed by everyone. And who needs to sign the permit? Also the National Parks Authority. Why? Because this is a national park. The manager of the national park in the city of David actually didn't want to sign. For the following reason. He found out that the excavation site is going to be exactly where his office stood. Until 2004, the office of the city of David was exactly up here. So basically where the ceiling is for you is where its floor was. All this was covered up with dirt and rocks. Eventually the office was taken apart and they started the excavation. Removing dirt and rocks away. Whenever it was a huge mess, they removed. Suddenly they reach a pile of big stones. Bring in a crane, remove them one by one, and underneath them find two things. One, a huge building. Two, bedrock. What is bedrock? The mountain itself, natural stone. Look down, please. See this gray floor? This is the natural stone, bedrock. You can't go deeper down. This is the natural stone. There's nothing underneath it. Let's say it like that, which means the most ancient layer was built right on top of it. Let's see what she found. Can you see a wall of stone right here?
Yeah.
See this wall of stone? Okay. Skip like 6 feet and you see a parallel wall of stone. In between, there's a little bit of a filling, smaller stones. What you're actually looking at is the width of the foundation wall. Why am I saying foundation? This isn't the building itself, it's what supports it underneath. This is the width of the foundation, but most of the way the foundation was destroyed and taken apart, so we don't have everything. So if you go to the second part of the wall, you can actually follow it to the left, skip a little bit and keep on following it, and it joins a wall at the far end of this metal platform. You can also follow it a little bit to the right and into sunlight. In total, 33 meters east-west. Look where the copy of the capital is. Underneath it, a wall of stone about 5 feet thick that extends outside the excavation site. This foundation continues. But they also found out that the foundation continues right here as well. This big pile, getting to 18 feet thick and the widest, extends outside the excavation site to the south. So what we have is 33 meters east-west and at least 20 north-south, but extending outside who knows how much more. Which means, what do you say, is this a residential home? I get a few no's here. Why not? It's too big. You could take an average Israeli apartment today, fit it inside this thing, something like 7 tons. This is huge. How do archaeologists know to date a building? How do they know it when it was used, when it was destroyed? How can they tell it? There are two main things. The famous thing you'll hear on the news is called carbon dating or carbon 14. Unfortunately, I have to tell you it's barely ever used. You know why? Because carbon dating used to date something that has carbon in it. What has carbon? Things that once lived, organic remains, which means it could be a piece of wood, an olive, or things like that. Unfortunately, these things tend to decompose on their own, disintegrate. So what do archaeologists usually use? Garbage. Broken dishes, kitchen utensils, pots and pans. They're all made in the ancient world, not made of metal, not plastic. They're made out of clay, hardened clay pottery. Cheap, easy to make, and breakable. Which means every generation too, the style changes. Just like the dishes I have at home are different in their style than the ones my grandparents have at home. That's what archaeologists use. If they find one broken piece of pottery, it's useless. It's just too random. But if they find dozens and dozens, they can give you a sequence of period of time that this was in use. And they find out that this building is only about 3,000 years old, plus minus about a century. They were disappointed. They hoped for 3,800 years back. They hoped for the beginning of the fortified city. This is much newer. And then Dr. Mazar says, okay, peace, calm down, everyone. 3,000 years ago is approximately King David's days, which fits perfectly, because definitely there was construction ongoing in those days. So she opens the second book of Samuel, chapter 5, and reads the following verse. And Hiram, king of Tyre is in Lebanon, different kingdom. Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons. And they built David a house. All the workers in the construction site, architects, masons, carpenters, all of them, weren't locals. They came from a different kingdom. That's what we call outsourcing. Why do we outsource everything? Usually, it's cheaper, they do it for me. But let's go back to this verse. He sent messengers and cedar trees, okay, the material, but also carpenters and masons, which means these weren't just regular artisans, these are specialized, professional, which means all the workers weren't local, not because it's cheaper, but because they're better. And that means the construction of King David's palace was done by people that weren't local, and apparently non-local style. Dr. Mazar looks at the size of this thing and says, you know what? I don't know so many foundations so big for any structure around here. This is something exceptional. So this might be built by someone that isn't local. And therefore she stands here about 11 years ago, end of the excavation, and says, this massive foundation might be where King David's palace stood. The news the same day they announced King David's palace was discovered. Did you ever notice there's a gap between reality and news? And what happens at that moment is that many visitors come over, take a look around, and expect to find a palace standing. They see just a bunch of rocks. So everyone says, where's the palace you've been talking about? Dr. Mazar would answer, if it was really here, it's above your heads. All we have left are foundations. How can you tell it's King David's palace? He says, to say the truth, I can't. It might be, I think it is. Others think differently. Might be a little bit before, a generation or two, maybe after. So what do? They decide to put a sign saying, we don't know. And that's the sign right here. It says, the large stone structure. What does that mean? Oh, there's a large stone structure here. And the remains of King David's palace? Question mark. It's not the only option. It could be a palace, could be a fortress, could be David, but could be also from a little bit before or after. So to say the truth, right now at the moment, with the amount of finds and type of finds discovered here, we just don't know enough. But to finish this part with at least a smile on our faces, take a look please at that capital. At that decoration from thousands of years ago. Have you ever seen this decoration before? This type. To see this decoration, all you need to do is be in Israel for a few days. Buy a bottle of water or a cup of coffee. Usually you'll be able to immediately see this, if you notice what's on the 5 shekel coin. For some weird reason, the Bank of Israel has nothing better to do with their free time. And they draw archaeological finds, put them on coins. Just a moment, I'll be able to show all of you. Okay? The Bank of Israel, really they're bored, right? What do they put on coins all over the world? Kings, queens, dead presidents, what else? All sorts of decorations and designs, monuments and animals. They're all part of heritage, all part of local culture. It's a way of teaching people the history of the land where they live. The Bank of Israel put an archaeological find on every coin, connecting today with thousands of years ago. But they think we're so bright, they didn't bother to write anything on the coin. Most Israelis do not know what this thing is. It's a fancy capital, dating back to the first temple period. One example, broken in two, was found just rolling down right here. And many more all over the country. So I already know how archaeology works, and sometimes it leaves us with this big question mark, but that's okay. What we will see later on in the tour is actually things that are in better preservation, as we call it, and therefore easier to understand. But before that, we walk up the same steps we came down, and meet exactly above us, which is where we started the tour, in just a few minutes. About 3,000 to 800 years back in time. The beginning of the fortified city of Jerusalem. Why did someone come live here? What do people need for survival?
Water.
Water. Food. Shelter. Let's call that protection. And something we cannot survive without. Water, food, protection, and Wi-Fi. Right? Most people can't survive without that. What is Wi-Fi for us? communication. A way to actually connect with other locations. In the ancient world, I can write a note, but it can't zip around. How do I send it to the other city? I give it to someone. I need a messenger. The messenger will walk on the road. So Wi-Fi for us is the road for them. Where do the roads go? Only where nature allows them to. In the ancient world, they didn't have bridges and they didn't have tunnels. Which means the moment you enter a valley, you or stay inside it or have to climb out. Roads in the mountain area try to avoid the valleys. They want to pass us. We'll definitely let them do so. And in the ancient world, there were roads and valleys, but only if you want to stay inside them. We are surrounded by valleys. The Kidron Valley behind you on this side, the Central Valley on the other, and therefore they meet at the south, and they make the city off the road. The road passes a little bit more than a mile west of us. If you know modern Jerusalem, King George, Ben Yehuda, Yafo area, where the modern civic center is, that's where the road passes. So whoever came to live here knew we're not on the road. We're not central. So why did they come here? Because of water. It rains here about 55 days a year. Part of the rain, that's it. There are countries where they have 55 days without rain. That's what we have. Part of the rain flows down into the valleys and down to the sea. For example, here we'll get to the Dead Sea. Part of the rainfall seeps naturally into the mountain. The mountain is like one big sponge. So what we get is the water filtering and sifting slowly through. It's really slow because it takes sometimes years, and eventually it will burst out at the bottom. And that's what we call a spring. Down below here is the Gichon spring. Lehagiach in Hebrew means to burst. That's the water they have all year round, nonstop. That's what brought people to live here. So we summarize it quickly. We started the tour at the top. We're halfway down. The spring is here. Where should they locate their city walls? 3,800 years ago. What do they need? Protection. So they can put the walls all the way down. But if they do that, the enemy will come with a battering ram from the top of the Mount of Olives. Let it go. Bang. The walls need to be very massive and strong to support that. Apparently what the people of Jerusalem preferred to do is build the walls a little bit higher up. And that means the spring is outside. So what do I need? Connection between the city and the spring. They made an underground tunnel. This is dry. Water doesn't go up. In this tunnel, people leave their homes, take their jugs, and walk into the tunnel to fill them up with water. I want to show you the jug. Here we go. The one in the back, the big jug, that's what you'll be carrying down to the springs. In those days, of course, mostly this was done by the children. It's a time in history that children had no rights and only duties to do at home. People took their jugs, went down to the spring, filled them up with water, climbed all the way back up home, and I know people that still do this. People that go to the supermarket, buy 12 bottles of mineral water, start climbing up the steps home. You know people that do that? So they're using ancient technology. That's what we're actually talking about. An access way that gives safe way down from the city underground to the spring. Before we join that tunnel with our jug in hand virtually, I'll show you a few finds from people's homes. For example, the house I showed you up on top, they were found destroyed with lots of different objects inside. I want to get into someone's life. Thousands of years ago.
So Hezekiah built this tunnel for what purpose initially?
Wait a minute. Hezekiah is from 2,700 years ago. So what we're talking about is more than 1,000 years before that. We'll get to Hezekiah, we'll see what he did. This first tunnel is a dry one from the city down to the spring.
So that's not his tunnel?
Not Hezekiah.
Oh, okay.
I know it confuses because you already know things. But it's
Okay, no, it's okay.
These are different finds from people's homes. Let's start from this side. See these things? The real size of this is the size of my fingernail. It is a tiny piece of clay. When it was still soft, someone took a seal and pressed it on top of it. So this is what we call a seal impression. And therefore you can read the name signed on the seal impression right here. It's in Hebrew. The letters we use today for the Hebrew language and the letters they used in the first temple period are different. Today we don't use these letters anymore. And this reads the name Bnayahu, the son of Hosha'ayahu. By his name I know one thing about him. He's a Jew. He has the Jewish suffix end to his name. Unfortunately, I have no idea who he was. Someone that signed a document thousands of years ago. Many of these were found that give us names and a little bit of information of let's say, bureaucracy, buying, selling, administration. Another type of fine are these. What are these?
They're gods.
These are gods and goddesses. These are known as idols. Is idolatry allowed? No, it isn't. Worship of idols is forbidden. More than 1,000 of these were found just in the city of David. If it's forbidden, what are they doing here?
It was a different people.
Or different people, or
Different king.
people didn't obey the law. Would you ever hear people that don't obey the law?
Yeah.
Drive a little bit faster than allowed?
Yeah.
So the prophets are fighting this. If you open your prophets, in every page you'll find
Yeah.
them fighting idolatry. The rule says if I fight it, it exists. If you find them in hundreds and thousands, it's everywhere. The prophets fight this in every page. For the prophet Yirmiyahu in Hebrew, Jeremiah, this is one of the reasons of the destruction of the first temple. So in his eyes, this destroyed the temple. What's the size of this thing? Same size of our modern idol that we never leave our house without. We're kind of sure it will save our life in case of emergency, and it's just a few inches in size. This is, by the way, we pay it every month, so we'll continue helping us. They paid only once for the potter that made it. A flute, beads for making a necklace, tools, also right here. And you know what this thing is? This is a comb. Yeah, teeth broke off, but this is a comb. These are normal objects from people's homes thousands of years ago. This is what they leave for us to see from those days. So please take your jug with you, put it on your head, or maybe in some kind of backpack. Imagine you're going down to the spring to fill it up, and you understand how wealthy and lucky we all are that we can turn a knob and have water flowing in our homes. This is what people did for thousands and thousands of years.
So how old are these things?
Most of these are from the first temple period.
Oh,
Isn't this the god of fertility?
It's one of the goddesses of fertility. You can have loads of those. Okay, go ahead.
And I'm sure you know how to use it.
Just the gun. Or there's fully automatic mode for people that don't.
Watch your head, please. Not yet, not yet. One more.
Because there was slightly lower.
Okay, we just went down 35 feet. We are inside the original tunnel, as you've been mentioning. If people feel too close to the ceiling, it means they're too tall. In those days, people were slightly shorter than we are. They didn't bump their heads here. They walked here down to the spring, filled their jugs, and back up home. This tunnel was used for centuries. And then they stopped using it. It gets full of dirt, full of garbage. No one was here till 1867. 150 years ago, when Sir Charles Warren, an engineer from London, was sent to find the antiquities of the Holy Land, which of course is very simple. All you need to do is dig. So he starts digging within the city that I call the new city. He also gets onto the Temple Mount and tries to dig there, but he wasn't allowed to. So what did he do? He went outside the city walls and started digging, trying to reach the Temple Mount, or from underneath, or at least from the side. During this dig, he finds lots of interesting things, but he also finds ruins outside the city, which puzzles him. In the first place, he says, there shouldn't be ruins outside the walls. That's the limit of the city, unless the limit we have today, the walls we know, aren't the same ones as thousands of years ago. Slowly, research starts checking things outside the walls and identifying this hill. Sir Charles Warren himself enters at the Gihon Spring, at the Kidron Valley down below. He enters into the mountain, finds a tunnel, crawls in with his helper, paper and pencil in hand, trying to map their way with candles as light. They reach a spot where the tunnel splits. They go straight ahead into a small round room, standing up to their hips in water. Everything is solid stone. There's nowhere to go except straight up. They're in the bottom of a pit. They build a ladder and climb up. They discover this tunnel from the bottom up. It was mostly covered with dirt and rocks and garbage. Let's continue a little bit further to exactly where Charles Warren found himself, climbing up his ladder. You can walk on either side, but please hold on. take a look down. Oh my gosh. And I can see our last one. Okay, very good. This is what Charles Warren came up. When he arrived, this side of the room was covered up with dirt all the way up to the ceiling. So the only option he had was to take a right and climb up what we just came down. He assumed everyone came down through this tunnel, threw their jugs in, filled them up with water, and went back up home. Let's let them pass us. Thank you. And that's what Charles Warren believed. But more than 40 years pass, and a French archaeologist arrives in, takes a look in, and notices that this can't be the well. If you look inside, you'll notice the walls are very bumpy. If you throw your jug, what do you get? You get the handle back, right? But not a jug full of water. They find out that this is natural. No one had a clue how to explain what's going on here till the end of the 1990s. When the City of David Visitor Center was going to be built outside the mountain, and during its construction, excavations started. They found a huge fortification protecting the spring from approximately 3,800 years ago. They said, wait a minute, fortress outside? Tunnel inside? They should be two parts of the same story. 1998, they discovered the tunnel continues right here. All this was covered up with dirt. They removed it and found the connection between the underground tunnel and the fortress outside. So right here the tunnel ends. And it joins into two walls, one on the left, one on the right, that form a fortified corridor leaving the mountain. Let's move over here so if they want to pass us, we won't bother them too much.
Okay.
And what actually happens is this is the corridor leading outside. The building you see outside is what was supposed to be the City of David Visitor Center. In its construction, they found the ruins of the fortress protecting the area of the spring. So people actually came right over here, left the mountain in between these two walls, filled their jugs right outside, back in and all the way back up home. I didn't say it was fun. I didn't say it was easy, but it's the best way to get water home.
Watch your head and your footing.
Many hundreds of years pass. 800 years. We get to 3,000 years ago. King David is approaching the Jebusite, Canaanite city of Jerusalem. What do the Jebusites say to him? They see him approaching with his army and they say to him, in Hebrew it's Lo tavo hena, which means something like, you shall not come in here. Apparently they really wanted to say something like, loser, we're much stronger than you are, you have no chance. David stands outside. Here's the Jebusites and understands something. They're fortified. He looks at their walls. Yes, they are. And then they say something about lame and blind. Maybe meaning they don't need soldiers. Maybe they say we can put lame and blind people on our walls. That's enough for us. David, you have no chance. David hears this and actually understands that not only is the city fortified, it also has a steady water source it can use during a long siege. And David announced on that day, 2 verses later, the first one that will kill the guards and touch the tzino. Tzino in Hebrew today means pipe. There were no pipes 3,000 years ago. So what does pipe mean? Apparently something connected with water. Maybe the water tunnel or water system. The first one, says David, that touches the water system of the city, I will make him my new general, the new commander of my army. Apparently what David is actually saying is, capture this fortification, take over these massive fortification walls, touch it, hold on to it. Hold on to it for 4 or 5 days and the people of Jerusalem will have nothing to drink. The city will fall. They'll have to surrender and they have nothing to drink. David captures the city by sending his soldiers to capture its water source. The moment they hold on to that, the city will surrender. And David doesn't need to build anything. He gets everything as is. He just sits in the stronghold and renames it City of David, after himself. This way. We left the mountain. We're inside what was supposed to be the City of David Visitor Center. That's this big building. See, we're outside the mountain. Down below, bathed in the blue light, you see a big pool. Straight ahead, you see a channel that connected it to the spring. It's okay. This is where the people got their water from this bathed in blue light pool. Today, of course, the water doesn't get here anymore. So we're exactly outside the mountain, but within the fortification that protects this area. So David captured the city, renamed it after himself. I'm sure someone ran up to him and said, David, are you sure? Sure of what? You really sure this is a good place to live? It's off the main road, it isn't central. Needs extra protection at the spring and not up on top. Sorry to say this like this, but it's quite a lousy city. There are much better ones. So what brought David to Jerusalem? Many people will explain one thing only. It's a few hundred yards up the hill. It's called Mount Moriah, the place where the temple was built. Did David know the temple will be built by his son in that location? No. I agree. The question is, do you have any evidence? What did they know? It seems as if they didn't know enough at that moment. So what brought David here? Maybe it's something else. That took people to 2 Samuel chapter 5. David was 30 when he became king. How many years was he king in total? 40 years, but in 2 separate locations. The first 7 years and 6 months, he was the king of his own tribe. The tribe of Yehudah, Judah. Where? In Hebron. That's about 25 miles south of us. On top of the main mountain road, in the center of his tribe, the tribe of Judah. The other 11 tribes have their own king. And then the elders of the tribes of Israel go to David in Hebron and say, can you please be our king as well? We believe in you, we think you're much better. They crown him as the new king of Israel there. And then he moves. He moves to Jerusalem as the king of all of Israel for 33 years in total. So the option is that David came here for the following reason. He said, if I'm the king of one tribe, I should be inside it there in Hebron. But if I'm the king of 12 tribes and I live inside one of them, I have a happy tribe and 11 that feel as if they only pay taxes. How do I make everyone feel united and together? I need a center. I need a capital that doesn't belong to any tribe. That is neutral. That brings them to a city that's off the road, trying to unite all these tribes together. Do you know any modern country that tried the same trick?
That tribe is
U.S. What else?
I didn't hear the question.
Another country, a modern country that tried the same trick.
Oh, the same trick.
The U.S. You ever heard of Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
Why is Washington, D.C. the capital?
I don't know. So you're telling me Jerusalem was not a city in any of the tribes of
It
Israel?
wasn't in the tribes. Who held it? The Jebusites, one of the Canaanites. When the 12 tribes of Israel actually lived all around.
So the
The Jebusites were left here a little bit on their own for a while.
like in the middle of Israel.
Exactly.
Everyone, like all the other
Around-
tribes had land, and then the Jebusite was just still
a
there.
little enclave, something little aside. I think it's 1790, beginning of the history of the United States, when they choose Washington, D.C. as the capital. Why? They don't want it to be in any of the states. So what do? They took a piece out of Maryland, a piece out of Virginia, separated into a separate district. To actually announce it as the place where the president lives, that is, not in any state. So that made Menachem Begin, Prime Minister of Israel, 37 years ago, tell a group of visitors from the U.S. that in the U.S. is a Washington, D.C., but here the name of the city is actually Jerusalem, D.C. And that's Jerusalem, David's city. A different D.C. than what you might know, but that's the place where you are right now.
So this was
It used to be the City of David Visitor Center. That's a huge building. Look down, see these huge boulders. They're part of the guard tower protecting the spring. Straight ahead you can see two walls, one on the right, one on the left. We saw them from the inside. That's the exit from the tunnel. And what actually happens right now is this screen comes down and joins us, and on the screen, the guard tower is rebuilt. Let's go into the tower. Here we go. And you can see the people arriving from the city, filling their jugs, and then resting for a moment before the way back up home. Seeing their neighbors, and they hear a little bit of the news and what's going on, and suddenly one says, "Do you know our king David is dying? He's old. Who'll be the next king?" asks a second. Someone says, "Solomon." Another says, "No chance, Solomon isn't the oldest. He's actually number 10, he's too young. He can't be the king." So who'll be the king? We don't know. You see the tower from the outside, and it opens up. You can see the water flowing from underneath the tower into the pool with the blue lights we just passed. Adoniah, David's fourth son, the oldest alive, says, "I should be king, not my baby little brother Solomon my father wants." And he leaves the city to crown himself down in the Kidron Valley. Adoniah's crowning himself. Bathsheba sees this, runs up to David. She's Solomon's mother. She says, "You promised my son will take over. Do something, please." David says, "Take my son Solomon, put him on my personal mule, give him my limousine with my laptop and codes. Take him down to the street, crown him there." Right here, he's crowned king, and they shout together, "Long live King Solomon!" What happens when we shout down in the valley? It echoes, and down in the valley, all the people, the shepherds and farmers, and the followers of Adoniah hear the echo. Most of them just don't move. But some of them come over here and find out Solomon, Shlomo, was crowned king. He's a teenager. He's young, they say. No, can't be. Everyone is gathering up in the city, trying to understand what's going on. Who'll be the next king? The younger one or the experienced oldest? If you read through the first chapters of the book of Kings, you find out that it takes a while for the people to accustom, to get Solomon as the king. Eventually, when they agree that he will be king, it's only after they find out how bright and wise he is. So Solomon changes Jerusalem. Here you can see a reconstruction of Solomon's Jerusalem, beginning at the south, where you can see the houses, fortified, circled by the walls. Climbing up, if Dr. Mazar is correct and her massive foundation, the large stone structure really is the palace, possible reconstruction. Solomon enlarges the city up north, adding halls of administration, palaces, and at the top of the hill, Mount Moriah, he builds the temple. We usually call it the first temple, but please notice that for Solomon it's the one and only. This is the city of Jerusalem, expanding, getting larger in the days of Solomon. But there's something really amazing, and that is that David captures the city at the spring, at the water source, and he transfers the government to the next generation in the exact same place. The water in his eyes is the key to the city. And this is a very important location where the next king is crowned, connecting him to the city and to its key, to the water down below. So this is what was discovered during the construction of this massive building that was only supposed to be a visitor center. And instead of construction taking a year and a half, it took about 17 years because of the massive excavation, discovering this huge guard tower and the pool we passed. So as we continue, we'll be able to see more of this guard tower that circles the spring where the group ahead of us is already going.
So you're saying on the picture there, that was
The biggest enemy approaching, almost 2 centuries later, were the Assyrians. They come from northern Iraq today. Their method is very simple. If you surrender to them, you join their crown, which means you pay a lot of taxes but survive. If you survive that, okay. Well, what happens to someone that fights back? The Assyrians come with their full mega power. Smash, crush, burn, destroy, and to punish, they also exile. The kingdom of Israel fought back. The Assyrians came and destroyed its city, captured its towns, and exiled its people. They are usually known as the 10 lost tribes. Slowly, during these 2 centuries, something happens. And that is that people build their homes outside the Central Valley, climbing up Mount Zion. So what we get is when the kingdom of Israel is destroyed, this is the size of Jerusalem. All these colors together. The king, at the time of the king Hezekiah, he's afraid that the Assyrians might try to attack him as well. He builds a new wall around the new neighborhood. A portion of this new wall was found right here. It's in the Jewish quarter today. He also renovates and rebuilds the ancient walls. They're already 1,000 years old from the days of the Canaanites. And he says, okay, my city is fortified and defended. Apparently someone came up to him, one of his advisors, and said, do you remember your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, David, that attacked the city through the water source? He says, yes, what about that? The Assyrians might attack the same water source and capture your city. What do? They find out that this spot, in the new neighborhood, in the Central Valley, is lower in height compared to the spring. So instead of going down to the spring, filling my jug, climbing all the way back up home, they make a tunnel. It is usually known as Hezekiah's Tunnel, diverting the water of the Gihon spring, I'm pointing out right now, under the hill coming out at the other end. So they don't need this guard tower anymore. They don't need the pool we passed with the blue lights. What do? They apparently, on purpose, pour the city dump on top of most of this, trying to conceal its true story, hiding it from the eyes of whoever's approaching, letting the water flow under the mountain coming out at the other end. Protect. Next room, we will take a seat for a moment, change our shoes, and get ready. If there's someone not interested in the water tunnel, don't worry, it's also allowed. So let's get into the next room and get ready for the Oh, it's cold! by Hezekiah to protect the water, to protect the city, and the people of Jerusalem were sure this really saves them. The prophet Jeremiah said, well, for now maybe, when he lived a century later, he was saying that in the next attack approaching by the Babylonians, the city will be destroyed, it will be captured. No one likes to hear bad news. No one likes to believe the prophet. And he tries in talking and talking and convincing, unsuccessfully I have to admit, trying to convince the people that also this water tunnel won't really save them. The city will be attacked. And if the people misbehave, the city will be destroyed. It was destroyed. And the Babylonians destroyed the city and the country and exiled its people to what will be known as the Babylonian exile. But dozens of years later, Cyrus, the Persian king, takes over Babylon and allows the people to come back home and rebuild a new city on top of its ruins. So we'll take a quick glimpse into the Second Temple period and find right here the pool of Shiloah, the pool of Siloam from the Second Temple period that was discovered just a few yards away.
Let's just sit up on that metal guardrail there. We'll just do it down there.
What is the first temple destroyed in 607? What, these are 586 or that big? Hello,
Oh, he's over there.
I have a lot of friends from the state.
Join, but I'll quickly do this right here. Take a look at the staircase you just sat onto. See, there's a corner right here. Continues over there. If you look backwards, you'll see the people coming down the stairs. We're on the side of the huge pool. Aniba. On the side of a huge pool from the Second Temple period. These stairs are from the Second Temple period, but that means that deeper down should be the finds from before. The pool from the First Temple period. The size of this pool was huge. Try to imagine the whole garden in front of you, fill it up with people and water. This is the main pool where the water comes out from the tunnel, and actually this is where everyone collected and gathered to bring water home. For drinking and cooking, for bathing and laundry, this is the main water source of the city for many, many centuries. This was found totally covered up with ruins and dirt. See the doorway? That's the height of surface when they started working. So everything was totally covered up. This is the pool itself, but I want to fill in the gap of the end of the First Temple period. We have First Temple period, the Babylonians are attacking, and the prophet Jeremiah says, the city will be destroyed, the people will be exiled. No one likes to listen to bad news, so what do they do to him? When he's lucky, they ignore him. When he's unlucky, they try to make him be quiet, usually in violent physical ways. And then one day the Babylonians approach the city, and Jeremiah tries to sneak out. At the gate, a guard notices him, catches him, says, "Where do you think you're going?" "I'm trying to get out," says the prophet. "You traitor, trying to help the enemy." And he takes him in front of the governors of the city. And 4 governors listen to his words. And first of all, we have their names. So we'll start with that. Shphatiah the son of Matan, Gedaliah the son of Pashhul, Yuchal the son of Shelemi, and Pashhul the son of Malchiah. 4 ministers of the government of Judah hear the words of the prophet, and they say to the king Zedekiah, last king of Judah, he's the traitor trying to help the enemy. What do we do with traitors? Kill him. But they don't kill him. Instead of killing him, they throw him into a pit, where they have nothing to eat, nothing to drink. Within a few days, he should die. But lucky for him, he was saved from the pit and locked up in prison. For the next year and a half or so, the Babylonian siege, he's locked up in prison. And there, he continues talking. If you ever read the book of Jeremiah, find out the 52 chapters. 48 of them are bad news. Destruction and exile. 4 speak of a new city, a return home, and a new city built on top of its ruins. These were apparently said when he was in prison. When he couldn't save the city, he speaks of the future. There in prison, he buys a field as a symbol that the city will be built again on top of its ruins. A field meaning he actually takes a piece of parchment and writes where is it and how much he paid for it and things like that, and then he signs it. What does it look like when you sign things? It looks like this. This is a document signed with a tiny piece of pottery, clay, you stamp your seal on top of. This is what a document looks like, as a symbol that the city will be built again on top of it. In the excavations of the city of David, especially up here, since the 1980s, they found hundreds of seal impressions this size. The first batch discovered more than 30 years ago was found in the house I showed you up when you started the way down. Right there. 51 seal impressions found, one of them with a name we know. That's this one. Gemariyahu, the son of Shaphan, a minister in the government of Judah. But someone said, how do you know it's the same man? Maybe it's someone else's same name. Happens. More than one person with the exact same name. 25 years passed till the next batch was discovered that told us of this place. And the new batch discovered right underneath them and rolling down the slope, they found more than 100. In between them, these two that we know. These are two of the ministers that grabbed Jeremiah and put him in jail. 3 names of ministers and governors from the same time found together. Chances these are 3 other people with same names aren't very high. 3 names of ministers out of hundreds of stuff. But to say the truth, the story doesn't end here. 2.5 years ago, actually a little bit less, there was an announcement of another seal impression discovery. This time discovered a little bit north of us, a little bit beyond the national park of the city of David, and this is a picture of it. 1 centimeter in size, very small, and on it a name. The name is Hezekiah, King of Judah. Lucky there was only one Hezekiah, King of Judah, so it can't be someone else. Same Hezekiah that made the underground water tunnel that we visited in just a while back. Today we speak of hundreds of names, 4 of them we know. 4 ministers and a king from the first temple period that names were found here. But because the city was destroyed and rebuilt, and destroyed and rebuilt, and destroyed and rebuilt, we have all these layers of ruins, one on top of the other, rebuilding the city again and again. So from the second temple period, loads of finds were found that I didn't show you yet. So I'll show you just a glimpse of them. Come please right over here. We will start with this thing. The real size, here it is. It's not the original, it's a copy of course, but just to see the real size, how small it is. This is a seal impression, but written from the second temple period, giving us information about the administration of the temple. Apparently it reads, pure for God, if I try to translate it from its original. A seal impression from the second temple period. From the same time, a coin, a silver coin, that weighed 7 grams. In Hebrew, half a shekel. The name shekel isn't a coin till 1981. The name shekel is a name of a weight. That's why in Hebrew, mishkal is weight. The state of Israel decided that will be the name of the coin and confused everyone. It's a half a silver shekel, 7 grams of silver from the second temple period. A golden bell, maybe a piece of jewelry, or even a piece of the garments of the high priest. And from after the destruction of the second temple, earring, an amazing golden earring. It's more and more finds pile up on top of each other, telling us the story of the city. And to say the truth, in the excavations of the city of David, they identified at least 21 different layers of ruins. The most ancient takes us thousands of years back. But on top of all this, there's layer 22. Today. People live on top of all these ruins today. You can visit many archaeological sites throughout the world. They might be very impressive and amazing. What do you see in them? Rocks, dirt, and signs. Oh, and visitors. But at 5 p.m., they lock the door, and the place is silent till the next morning. The amazing thing about this area is that people live here, and children go to school, and people come back from shopping and work. So when the site is closed, layer 22 continues to function, and people keep on living and building their homes on top of the ruins of Jerusalem. So what I did with you in the last almost 3 hours was talking non-stop. You survived, which is quite impressive. We actually walked in the history of the city from thousands of years ago, the days of the Canaanites and Jebusites, the days of David and Solomon, kings and prophets. And when the place was destroyed, I could visualize the ministers of the city taking their children with them and walking to exile. But 50 or 60 or 70 years later, their grandchildren start coming back to rebuild the new city on top of its ruins and start the city again. So I want to thank you for joining us today, walking in the history of an ancient city, but also, to say the truth, in its present time today as well, seeing its different layers from thousands of years back till today. Thank you for suffering me talking so much. And all these underground tunnels, walking in the footsteps